Good afternoon and welcome. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. YouTube, Facebook Live. This is the Dialogue with Dozie. Thanks for hopping on. Text, tag, tell your friends we're on. Man, when I say special, I mean very, very, very special guest. We treasure all of our guests, but tonight is a brilliant mind, a loving heart, a bona fide strategist. He's a commentator on local TV stations in Duval and otherwise. And the scope of his brilliance goes across the length and breadth of not only this nation, but this world, this planet. And just blessed tonight to have Reverend Dr. John Allen Newman on with me. Doc, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Good to be with you.
Our absolute blessing, and thank you for joining us. Tonight's show was titled, and we didn't get out to you all, so you'll got to get it out. And we'll be looking for you throughout the week as you tell people about the show. It's entitled, Where Do We Go From Here? Last week, I didn't have the energy or the composure to deal with what happened 2 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago now. And I have Dr. Newman who commentated the election results that night. And we're going to just work our way through it and talk about it. Let me give some context. And I had hoped Reverend Dr. Rhonda Thomas was set to join us tonight, but she's unavailable at this time. We don't know if she'll pop in later or not. We had a coordinated scheduled online meeting the day after the election to talk about the observations that we made as we observed polling places throughout the state. One of the things that I saw in one of the polling places that I observed, we were looking for the DeSantis law enforcement, the integrity police, and all of those to see if there was intimidating factors from them to try to keep our returning citizens from voting. We did learn that they were at some of our predominantly black areas. They weren't in predominantly white areas. There was where all of the polling people, several of the polling people were black, but most of the voters were white. One of the polling persons related to me that there was an attempt to intimidate her by a person who had voted for the 45th president, who was wearing all of his bumper stickers on her jacket, adorning it. And when she walked out, she stopped by this African-American sister and said, "Yeah, I voted for him. He's going to win, and just wait." That kind of attitude. So the Zoom call that I was on the next day, we were supposed to relate, Dr. Newman, our observations across the state. It turned out to be a therapy call because people were just breaking out. They have a requirement to come on camera. Many people did not come on camera because they couldn't compose themselves. And one of our assistant executive directors related that she was concerned for her own parents. Many of our group is Hispanic, and she said that she had received thousands of calls since 7 a.m. from Hispanics across the state, asking was there absolutely anywhere that they could seek safety from what's expected. What are you hearing as a result, other than what we're seeing, the crazy recommendations to the cabinet? What are some of the things you're hearing on the local level that's going to shake up as a result of the election results?
Well, I think, and first of all, thanks for allowing me to be with you tonight. I think that what you shared is pretty much being replicated around the state, probably around the country. There's a lot of anticipatory anxiety, in the community, and people not sure as to what will happen. There is this kind of separation in the mind of some that his rhetoric was just political to get elected, but that he will govern differently because he's got other bodies of Congress to be a check on him. Not so sure that's the case. I've basically said to people, take him at his word. Whatever he said, then that's what he's going to do. And it would appear, particularly as you mentioned, from some of the appointments that have been made, that he's sending a signal that he's going to do exactly what he said. And I think that concerns people, it's interesting kind of what I'll call false dichotomy. On the one hand, he talks about the weaponization that was used against him, while he openly indicates he's going to use the Department of Justice to go after his political enemies. So it's wrong when it's against him, but it's okay when he does it. That's why I call that just a kind of strange dichotomy of circumstances. But I think there is a lot of fear. I think there's a lot of just not knowing what's going to happen. Of course, if you're in the immigrant family, then there's a lot of concern. There's the separation predicated on children who are citizens because they were born here and protected by the Constitution until they try to change it, that is. And then you have those who are the dreamers. Now, the dreamers, those who are DACA, are temporarily protected because of the legislation that President Obama got through, and they're still protected, or it could have been executive order, I'm not sure now, but they are protected until something happens with them. But what you have is you have parents and grandparents who have been here 25, 30 years, and their children and grandchildren are citizens. And so as I heard that the new gentleman who's going to be over the border and the immigration space, when he was asked by a reporter, a journalist, well, are you going to do, what about families and family separation? He said, well, that's not a problem. They can all just be deported as a family. That was his response. So, but here's the thing about that. I mean, to be honest with you, mass deportation is logistically really impossible for a couple of reasons. One, without the replenishment of the workforce and the labor force, it would be a tremendous jolt to the economy. And so people who voted because of the higher prices of eggs have seen nothing if there's mass deportation and there are no blueberries and no bananas or no apples and oranges or lettuce and tomatoes. There's a lack of being able to get chicken because all of those places heavily are employed by the immigrant family. So I think it's going to be difficult for them to actually do that. Now, I'll say this, though. There are people who do need to be deported. Yeah. Absolutely, the criminal element, absolutely, the MS-13s and other gangs and the cartel element, the criminal element, they need to be deported. But in addition to that, there have been an inordinate amount of Chinese who have come through the southern border. China is not our friend. Trust me, they are not our friend.
Right.
And so and I'm sure there's a lot that goes on behind the veil we don't know about, Dozell. So I'm sure the intelligence community has been keeping an eye on them, but it's not something they would talk about. But they have to be deported. That's a national security issue. So, but to your point, there's a lot of consternation over immigration and over what people feel are going to be the lack of certain protections we've enjoyed because of the attitudes in this space in which we live. It's been unleashed of Pandora's box of things that are anti-us, and many feel that.
So I think when we just kind of get down to it, it's a black and brown discriminatory decision to deport. We've talked about the southern border, which predominantly black and brown. Of course, down here we have the high Haitian population. Mm-hmm. And, we know how they misrepresented the truth, talking about the Haitian population in Springfield. You don't hear. I mean, the new president's wife is an immigrant. family members of immigrants. You don't hear about those who have come and became citizens after they got here.
Mhm.
And that is the thing. And I'm just wondering, well, let me back up let me go back all the way up. And there are two questions I want to ask you right off. But let me ask you this. What were the statistics like in Duval? What percentages was the national ticket for he and Rick Scott? How big were their victories? And then the local elections, the council elections, the representative elections, were they were they closer? Or because this trend across the nation, which a lot of us just still don't believe, even though we understand America's misogynistic and racist, we just don't fully accept that was that large of when you looked at the numbers who turn out for the events, the fundraisers, the rallies. It just seems disproportionate to the numbers and way off from the polls, which are not saying, which are not perfect, but just for her not to have won any swing states. So what was it like in Duval?
Well, Duval is pretty purple. Trump won Duval, but not by much.
Okay.
Not by a lot. Now, in terms of Baker, St. John's, Flagler, the surrounding counties of Duval, Nassau, he did better. But Duval, he won not by much.
Okay.
City council and particularly school board elections, the Republicans also, even though school board elections are supposed to be nonpartisan,
Right.
the reality is that they're not. And one of the gentlemen who won was supported by Moms for Liberty, and so they skew conservative. Right. And so and happened to be an African American brother, as a matter of fact. And across the board in terms of the city elections, for the most part, and I don't have the data anymore in front of me, but for the most part, it's skewed the same in terms of down ballot. The Republicans who they thought would win did, and there were some surprises, but for the most part, that's not the case. Now, of course, we nationally won a couple more senatorial seats to African American women who will be new senators in the new Congress. But in terms of the battleground states, and when I was on air, I mentioned this, that I thought it really was kind of a head fake from the Trump campaign, in that they were talking about the need to reach those in the middle, and they were always, going back and forth. The commentators were always saying that, well, with this rhetoric being what it is, how can he reach the middle? They weren't really trying to reach the middle. They had a strategy of going after low propensity white male voters and Hispanic men, because I've seen Hispanic men who actually have been on air after the election and have said that it's challenging for Hispanic men to vote for a woman in leadership. They admitted that. So I'm not being in any way racial, but they admitted that. So you have the misogynistic aspect of it, but also what you have is you have a case in which the Michigan situation specifically was just the worst possible situation. You had the Arab-Israeli conflict. So you have a tremendous citizenry who are Muslim and Arab in Michigan, Dearborn, right outside of Detroit, and they voted for Trump. Those who didn't vote, you can kind of trifurcate. You had those who didn't vote, those who voted for Harris, those who voted for Trump. So when it all got melted down, Trump got the plurality of votes in Michigan. And it's kind of hard to believe because, Trump and Netanyahu have a close relationship. So for the Arab and Muslim community to believe something different will happen now, it's kind of hard to believe, but that's what happened. That's what happened. And ultimately, it was lower voter turnout on the Democratic side. So it wasn't, because I believe, and I haven't again checked the latest numbers, but I believe the way it was trending, the trend lines were that Trump did not get as many votes this time as he got when he ran against Biden, or Biden ran against him in 2020, or it's very close. So it was not a landslide or outpouring. They just went after a demographic, a couple demographics, along with their base. It was primarily older white men and older white women, and that was the coalition that worked.
I really, at the best of me, don't get how that Dearborn area could have. What I was told was that they sat down. My boots on the ground in that area, who lived there in the Detroit area, say they made a conscientious effort to sit down, and to hear that he actually polled better than her slightly. And then in Wayne County did not tear the polls down either.
No, my contacts in Michigan said the same thing. Generally, they were expecting upper 50% turnout in Wayne County. I don't know what they got, but they fell short. 55, 56, 57%. Had that actually happened, chances are that would have counterbalanced what was lost in Dearborn and the Upper Peninsula. The Upper Peninsula is totally different than the metropolitan areas. But cumulatively, when you have the impact of low voter turnout, and then you have the other side with a voter enthusiasm that got them to the polls. And I think that there were some strategic things. Always hindsight's 2020, as you know, Dozell, but a lot of things could have been done differently. I think that they should have gotten her out more. But to your previous point that I don't want to miss, that they voted for him, or they sat down or didn't vote for her because to some degree they wanted to send the Democrats a message. Yeah. Remember when the Democrats had their primary, the unaffiliated, there were over 100 and some odd thousand of them who voted unaffiliated to send a message. And what really I think was the straw that brought the camel's back was when they disallowed a Palestinian Democrat to address the convention, and that was a request, and that request was denied. And I think that was basically the straw that brought the camel's back.
Now, is it Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota?
Yes.
Okay, so Keith, that is apparently why he went to Michigan. Mm-hmm. Because to try to repair that damage, and I don't understand why that would happen. I guess at that point I guess the whole issue with the Israel-Gaza situation was kind of up in the air because Kamala had just been selected 4 weeks earlier, mm-hmm. and they were trying to figure that piece out. But I just have a heart. Your home state, I know she went into the rural areas. She went mm-hmm. into beauty parlors that mm-hmm. no one had ever done before. Now, mm-hmm. supposedly no one organized like a campaign like Barack Obama did. And mm-hmm. then on state level, I'm told that Mayor Gillum did the same thing here. He had offices in every county. Mm-hmm. That's why he almost got in office. And so she didn't have a chance to do that. But I also thought it was just a matter of transitioning the name from Biden to Harris in those offices. So I just can't see. Of course, did that Senate seat that ended up flipping, right?
Yes, it did.
Yeah. Okay.
And McCormick got it.
Okay. So money is kind of bought up. Do you think in 2 years, when people, especially if all of the harsh measures that has been promised come to fruition, or some of these quacks that forgive me the language, end up in these high cabinet positions and things go as crazy as they want to. You see the Justice Department just vindictively coming after military people, coming after people in the Biden administration, maybe he himself. Do you think that things will start flipping politically in 2 years as far as the House being won back and maybe some Senate seats flipping and a setup for 4 years to get back in office? How do you see that?
I think there's a couple of things there. Number one, the trend lines will probably be what they normally are, which is the administration in power loses during the next midterm, that probably will be true to form for a couple of reasons. One, because he's not going to be able to deliver on everything he ran on. I happened to listen to a Philadelphian, Michael Smerconish. He comes on CNN on Saturdays, but he's a great guy. And on his Wednesday show afterwards, on POTUS, because I listen to that every day as well.
Okay.
He had callers because he opened it up, like, well, what do you feel about the election, and particularly about what Trump says about immigration and so forth. And when he opened the phone lines for an hour, the callers were saying Trump was right. The run on immigration is not so much about the economy. The economy was important, but it was more about immigration. And then went on about how the first caller started off talking about we want to get all of these folk who are not white, who are immigrants, out of the country. And then closed by saying we want to go back to the 60s. That's really what it's about. And so Michael was trying to save the call by saying, well, you're going to be typecast as the reason why folks say, Trump people are, deplorables or whatever the case may be. And the guy says, I don't care what you call us. That's what we really voted for. And if he does not do it, which is my point, and if he does not do it, there will be a turning on him for not keeping his word. So because it is logistically impossible, as I mentioned earlier, he just can't do it. Right. And to do it, if you were to do it, would be so optically ugly that people who voted for him might say, I know what I voted for, but I didn't think it was going to look like this. So that is going to be problematic as it relates to, the midterm election as well. So I think that more seats will be up. There's going to be some disappointment, some significant disappointment in terms of that immigration piece, because I think he's overpromised, and I think he'll probably wind up as a result under delivering. But also, let me say this about the offices and everything that Vice President Harris had across the battleground states. Yes, he was in my state, Pennsylvania, heavily. Yeah. But the problem is that, kind of peeking behind the veil, on that level, the candidate really isn't making a lot of decisions.
Right.
I mean, the candidate really isn't. I mean, almost after the convention, if not before then, that's basically given over to a group who basically schedule, approve, so forth and stuff. She may have had some input, but one of the things, in retrospect, one of the mistakes was, for instance, there was a proposal by the CBC to have a bus tour with Congressional Black Caucus persons going around and going into the Black community and barbershops and salons and that whole piece. And the campaign rejected it. It was going to cost $10 million.
But John, they did that in the southern states, and I thought North Carolina.
Maybe they did do it in terms of having people who are in CBC to go to places, but I'm saying that proposal was rejected. Is my point.
They did.
So, it may have been. Let me cut you off. It may have been rejected because they felt they were already doing it in other ways. So that could have been the reason why. But the point I'm trying to make is this: at the end of the day, and this is something the Democratic Party is going to have to deal with, in my humble opinion. They're going to have to come to terms with the fact that you have a constituency that gives you 80, 90% or more loyalty. And then when you look back in retrospect, what were the things you did that you promised? Were all those things done? And oftentimes people can say some of them were done, but other things were not done. And so I think that's going to be part of the autopsy or the after action report, that the ground game, even though they had an awful lot of personnel, I've heard some things about, how the allocation of funds for the ground may not have been as equanimous as it should have been.
One of the things I've heard, and I just commend Reverend Al. I commend you that you can even look at news. Of course, I worked the polls all day, bounced all over Broward County, and then came in and lost my appetite as soon as I saw how Georgia was trending.
Yeah.
And hearing the bomb threats and all of that, I just saw the trend line. I saw North Carolina trending, and there was no hope coming out of Pennsylvania. And I looked at low Wisconsin and Michigan, where she had a slight poll edge. So it just didn't feel good. And I ended up staying all night. But I ended up staying up. I saw in morning, I couldn't wait to see Morning Joe. I wanted to see their reaction. Joe and Mika came on with a different tone. And they came with the negatives of the campaign and why the loss took place, as opposed to when Reverend Al spoke. These were the words right out of his mouth, and I'll always applaud him for this. He said, "You saw the disparity at the polls because America is a racist, misogynistic place, and we've not gotten past it." My mentor went on to say, Dr. Bracy, that if they did not support a white woman who was more qualified than any presidential candidate in the last 50 years, what makes you think they're going to support a mixed Hindu, Indian black woman who's married to a Jewish white man? What makes you think they're going to support them? And all of the progress that we thought we made in 2008, that Trump reminded us in 2016 we had not made, it just all came to the forefront. And I just commend Al for putting that out there like that.
But I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, and that's not an oversimplification, but I think we also have to take some responsibility that after Barack Obama won his first and second term, African-American community politically went to sleep.
Absolutely.
And so at the end of the day, for instance, in 2016, I'll never forget these statistics because they're burned in my consciousness. In 2016, Trump won Michigan by 10,000 votes across the state. Not 10,000 more than Saginaw or Flint or Detroit. 10,000 votes across the state. Yeah. He won Michigan. 100,000 African Americans in Detroit, not Saginaw, not Flint, Detroit, did not vote. Now those are facts. And across the country, in Philadelphia, the number of African Americans that voted, the percentages of turnout, not the percentage of the vote that turned out, because that's oftentimes misunderstood. Kamala got 98%, 92% of the black female vote. She got 80% of the male vote. Yeah. In some demographics, he got more. Like the younger voters, he got more. But in the whole demographic, she got 80%. But 80% of what? 92% of what? That's the problem.
That's the point.
So 90% of a million is one thing. 90% of 600,000 is another thing. Now I'm just throwing those numbers out to make my point. So at the end of the day, the shift really wasn't in the country. It's perceived as such. Yeah. And they're going to absolutely optically message that. Well, the country has voted. The country made a decision. It's the country that showed up to vote who made the decision. Because I think again, it'll be borne out as time goes on. When there is opposition, and I expect there will be, to the tactics used to deal with immigration, I believe at that point, many people will rise up and say, we did not vote for this. Because the MAGA base is not all of who voted for him.
Yeah.
All right. So understand, a lot of Nikki Haley voters came home.
Yeah.
They just couldn't make themselves vote for Kamala.
Yeah.
For some of the reasons you may have mentioned, right? So without
Who thought here in the state with abortion on the ballot that it would turn out as such? I mean, we all thought, well, that's going to drag people to the polls. Even the marijuana initiative. I mean, I was like angry to the point. I saw some guys that I know that's their propensity, and I'm saying to myself, bro, you know, if you get taken down because something that was easy to accomplish, I know 6% is a high threshold, but if we don't go to the polls, we lose it, and we lost both of those amendments, and it's just
but did not lose them by much. But that 60% is a high threshold, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
it's a very high threshold.
And with the intimidating tactics, let me just say this: we're gonna go to break. When Jesse ran in 1984,
I remember it well.
I don't know if I want to. I went to the state Congress. It was in Pensacola, and I was assigned. I was a policeman at the time, and he had not accrued Secret Service protection. And the president at that time, you know who it was, asked me if I would please, protect him, and I did. Got a little team. We protected him. Jesse had, and I know we can both hear it. His thing was, we got 32,000 non-registered voters in Jackson, Mississippi alone, and he just say rocks laying around. And he went through all of the southern states and talked about all of those rocks. Well, I have 4 counties that I'm responsible for in the state, and I targeted many of the African American populations in those. And I had a threshold that I was trying to reach of improvement. And the first couple of precincts, I was encouraged. Duval, Escambia, Broward, and Volusia. And I was, and then I looked, and then as it went closer and closer down, we just fell off in some places by almost 50% of not vote. And I could not understand that with the black female. And these were targeted black minority precincts. So I just say it's rocks lying around. What do we do about this voter apathy? I don't know. Maybe it's going to take what we experience over the next couple of years to help push us back to the poll. We're going on the other side of the break. We're going to talk a little bit more about our communities in general, and start talking about candidates for 2028 and so forth, and the shenanigans around the gubernatorial race that I'm sure you're hearing them coming out. So we'll be right back after the break. My dear guest today is Reverend Dr. John Newman, dear friend, friend of the show. We'll be right back. GoGigaWorld.com, man, they'll make you look good. They'll get your brand, your product. They'll get you out there. They'll get you in front of the public. They'll market your product, your product. GoGigaWorld.com. Make them a part. Join the team of the Toyas and Marquias, and let them get you out there and see what they can do to put you on the forefront. That's GoGigaWorld.com. Listen, last week I didn't deal with this matter. Probably would not deal with it as in-depthly tonight had I not have a great soul like John Newman on with me tonight. But just to throw a little, just to kind of soften the blow a little bit, tonight it's going to be a dang dog. I don't know how many of you all saw that production on Friday night, Netflix. They bragged that they made so much money that it broke the net. No, dog. What really happened was that you didn't have adequate production equipment up there. That's what broke it. And dang, dog, I'm just gonna say right off the bat, for the show that people stayed up, and for all of the lead up, the build up to it, dang, dog, we didn't get no better product than that. Over about 45 minutes, you fought 6 2-minute rounds, and there were probably maybe 150 attempted swings across the board. Dang, dog. Hey, it ought to be somebody ought to get some money back for that. I ain't mad at you, Mike, for what you got. I'm mad at you all for what you got. But dang, dog, for the money you all got for that exhibition, one thing I can say, and I kind of coincide with Stephen A. and the team, I'm so glad that nobody got hurt, particularly you, Mike. We heard about your hospitalization, the weight you lost, the amount of blood, and apparently you fought for your life. And the tapes that we saw of you boxing looking like Mike Tyson 30 years ago, you were nowhere near that. What we saw was a man who looked like he was 68 instead of 58, limping into the ring with a knee band on. Dog, your knees must be worse than mine. You limped into the ring, you threw a few punches, you got him off you a little bit, and then for the last 4 rounds, all we saw was like hugging. It reminded me of the Ali Anika, the kickboxing and the boxing exhibition that we saw out of Ali and Anoki several years ago, about 40 years ago, where nobody wanted to hurt anybody. Thanks for not hurting, Mike. But I hope you can rest well with that, 40 million you made. And Mike, with the 20 million you made, hey, dog, I understand Bitcoin is going right now with this crazy administration going in. Dang, dog, invested. So you don't have to go back in the ring and rip us off and expose Netflix, because Christmas Day, if that production is horrible with the NFL games that we saw today, Netflix, as much as we like looking at all of our TV programs, our reruns, you're going to get canceled, dog. Dang, dog, don't come back, Mike. We'll remember you for the great champion that you were. Had to have a little fun tonight dealing with this dire product. John, one of my daughters, you know one of them, she's madam producer of this show and the other stuff that we do virtually. And our other daughter's a psychologist. You were talking about damage that will be done to the economy if he does this mass deportation, which, like you said, logistically, I'm hearing a lot of mayors say they're not going to commit their police forces and so forth. Of course, we understand this guy's talking about the military actually getting involved. And he's probably going to do some of this to make us show. But when he gets around, we were on the road last week, and almost everywhere I went, there were immigrants that were serving us, from the timeshare to the eating places. And one place, I was at one of America's popular buffets, and you can see I've been to some buffets in my life. And while we were there, it was a minute before the waitress came. And I said, my gosh, are these poor sisters and brothers already starting to shy away? And then it just dawned on me, if this happens, because we know Byron Trump's not going to work. He's not going to be busting any tables or picking in the fruit or anything. What are they going to do if it comes to that? What are they going to do? Is the economic mind that Trump has kick in and let him, make a rational decision? And then we got the 4-year problem. I meet with a group of gentlemen that are senior to me on Mondays, and we were saying, is he really going to leave office? And if he does leave office, we're stuck with the dire issue of trying to defeat a even crazier person in J.D. Vance.
Well, there's a lot there to deconstruct. I saw a piece that was done, I think it was on CNN the other day, where they interviewed a couple of farmers in California. One of the farmers grew 50% of, I want to say blueberries, I'm not sure, but one of the fruit he supplies 50% for the country. And his workforce has already been affected by the result of the election. And both of these farmers, and who did not appear to be Democrats by their conversation, but both of these farmers said, if there's mass deportation, as they have at least campaigned on, you can expect that the economy will ultimately shut down. Those were the words that came out of their mouths. And so at the end of the day, there's going to be some repercussions if they actually do the mass deportation as they suggest they're going to do it, in the way that they're going to do it. Now, I did hear recently, I think it was today, where Trump is going to try to rely on an old law to basically break the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits the military from being used on American citizens. And he's going to try to use some emergency provisions from the executive options of laws he can invoke as president to actually pull that off. So I really think that at the end of the day, once again, it's going to be a matter of people actually seeing what it looks like and realizing how ugly it is. The other thing is that, and you said your daughter is a psychologist, and so I spend, of course, a lot of my work I've done in that space, particularly in my master's and doctoral work, and did my doctoral work on the impact of racism on African American brain health. And from being Black in America, we suffer significant brain health dysfunction and attrition just from being a person of color. We lose 4 years over a lifetime of functional brain health from being Black in America. And this was done by 2 white PhD researchers out of the University of Wisconsin. And so that's real. And these kind of things, these stressors that we go through, the micro and macro aggressions that we go through. And one of the things that really kind of gets me is when I hear, and I heard somebody today say, well, you know, this election proved that America really doesn't want to be siloed, you know, and all of this diversity talk. And, you know, we just want to be Americans and not be hyphenated. And my response was, you know, it's interesting that you want me to not call myself a Black American while you remind me that I am. So I get pulled over and then realize that this particular pullover was about nothing other than the car I'm driving. So I was driving while Black. I go to a department store and I get followed for no reason because I'm shopping while Black. My Black sisters go to the hospital when they're pregnant and discover that the African American mortality rate for pregnant women is twice as high as it is for their white counterparts because they're pregnant while Black. When I talk to my Black brothers and sisters, my Black sisters, they tell me that their pain is not recognized as much as their white counterparts, which the medical community has acknowledged is true, that they don't take Black women's pain as seriously as their white counterparts. So they're sick and neglected while Black. And on the one hand, you want us to stop saying we're Black Americans. I tell you, here's the deal we'll make. We will stop calling ourselves Black Americans when you stop reminding us that we are.
Good luck with that.
Right.
Good luck with that.
Right.
On the state level, I've been kind of privy to some information that, and you're probably aware of it. The deal was that Rubio was going to come back and become governor, and DeSantis was going to succeed Rubio in the Senate.
Yeah.
And Trump threw a monkey wrench in that when he nominated Rubio. And one of the reasons that he allegedly nominated Rubio was, remember, it was Little Marco a few years ago. He nominates him so that his daughter-in-law can inherit Rubio's seat. And of course, DeSantis is not going to do that. So now there's just a greater rift between the two of them because he knows that in 4 years, DeSantis still has his eye on the presidency. And now we're being told, I don't know if you'd heard this, that DeSantis, who got the supermajority in the Florida legislature to okay him running for running for president, not having to resign his seats like everybody else is done to run, he is now going to try to hold on to both seats. He's going to try to take Rubio's Senate seat and hold on to the governorship until the term is up in 2026. Had you heard that?
No, I hadn't, but nothing surprises me that they tried to hold on to power, because power is also money and access. And in terms of who they're going to run in 26, the word I got is they're going to run Byron Donald for governor. For governor, that's the word I got.
Why? Hey, Kim. Yeah, we talking about that now, Kim. And we welcome your comments. We know you're out there. We'll pick you up from either forum, YouTube or Facebook. That's my brother, my partner in crime. He's on the
Hey,
side.
Thomas said hello.
So if Donald runs, the word before him was Gates, and now we got a whole lot of breath to see if the Senate's going to confirm him or reject him, because we understand his whole thing of being nominated was a ploy to keep that report from coming out, being public this past week. If he's resigned, there would be no need for it to come out. So he supposedly resigns to become Attorney General, knowing that he likely would not be confirmed as Attorney General. So before all of those shenanigans, supposedly he was coming back to run for governor. And the names on the blue side of the track is that they were looking at running either Val Demings, her husband, which, Val's already suffered a traumatic statewide loss, but they were looking at trying to draft Grant Hill, who has name recognition, but does not have not necessarily a charismatic name. What were some of the names that you heard? And of course, Nikki Fried is already, we know she's running. So is Sharvin Jones from down here. But I think they've shown that Sharvin's sexuality may stand in the way of his being seriously considered. What names?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Were you going to say something else? I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut across.
No.
Okay. I've heard about Chairperson Fried wanting to run. Really hadn't had my ear to the ground very much on statewide gubernatorial Democratic politics. I think, as usual, there would be many that jump in and seek to do that. I think what has to happen in the interim, however, and this is my humble opinion, I just know a little bit about politics, not a lot, but in my humble opinion, I believe that the Democratic Party has a lot of work to do in terms of solidifying its base, and also understand that I ran into President Obama's data guy about a decade ago, David Seamus. And at that point, after Obama won his second term, he said that he felt that Florida was actually trending light blue. And so you see from that time to now, it's a deep red, right? And that happened because a couple of things. That there was a mass migration from New York, New Jersey, West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, people who came to Florida, who came with a particular conservative mindset. So now there is a 1 million plus to the positive registration numerically above the Democratic Party for the Republicans. So it's going to be tough for a minute, because that didn't happen overnight.
Right.
And turning that around is not going to happen overnight. But the Democratic Party has to also do some soul searching in terms of its messaging and how it speaks to people where they are. I happened to catch a young lady who just won out in the state of Washington, Democrat, a freshman Democrat. And she was actually an automobile store owner. I think it was a repair shop owner, right? A single proprietor. And she said, the problem is that my party didn't speak to me. She said, in my district, She said, one out of every 4 women who are pregnant are hooked on fentanyl.
Lord have mercy.
She said, that's how hurt my community is that I serve. She said, we went from a 5-day school week to a 4-day school week because of our timber industry's losses. She said, the reason why I won is I talk to people where they hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Democratic Party has to find a way, and it's never been great at messaging in my view, but the Democratic Party, we have to find a way of speaking to people where they hurt and asking them, what can we do to help you? Where can we come alongside of you to help you? And understand that they may have some difference of opinion on things that you may hold somewhat sacred.
Right.
You got to let your sacred cows kind of go a little bit,
Right.
you know, to meet people where they are.
Right.
Because there may be, you know, out of 10 things, there may be 6 or 7 that they agree on and 3 they don't.
Right. Right.
The tendency is to reject them because of the 3 they don't agree on, as opposed to receive them because of the 7 things that they do, while calling themselves a wide tent party. So I think that's really the issue. The whole thing about fracking and that whole space in terms of our energy portfolio of the country, that was easy, you know. And Kamala's pastor and I have been friends for 40 years, and we would talk during the campaign. And I mentioned to Amos, I said, I realize, you know, you're not going to be able to necessarily, you know, run us up the flagpole. I said, but fracking is easy to really defend. And I said, at the end of the day, fracking has different proponents now, or different components than it used to. Now there are non-toxic chemicals that are used in fracking, as opposed to the chemicals that were there when the fracking began, which were poisoning the water systems. So I was speaking to the issue of her not changing her values. They attacked her for saying she has not changed her values when she changed her position. I said, it's easy to defend. America's the greatest innovators in the world. Now we've found a way to mitigate the things I was concerned about. I'm not concerned about those things anymore. So that's why I'm for fracking. That's clean, that's easy, it's easy to message, and people understand, oh, wow, she got better information and she made a better decision. Boom. But she had to be careful because the environmentalist wing of the party was going crazy.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Even though they weren't coming out hard, you know, in terms of their public messaging, but under the radar, they were upset, you know, in terms of how she was handling that, and made it look like she didn't have a good answer. And it was easy, you know, it would have been difficult to message that. But
you talked about the messaging earlier, and this one I was just listening on Urban View, Reverend Al's show, and one of the things the person said, which you alluded to earlier, was that Democrats don't fight hard; they don't fight back. 2 things that they stuck the Harris campaign with was this transgenderizing thing in the prisons, when in all actuality, and it's recorded, the Trump administration the last time spent more money. It wasn't something that just slid across the desk and you just kept it going. They put more money into that program than the Biden administration has done in its 4 years. And that was never really combated, because you spoke to how he targeted males, white males, and you know, we're looking at football games. That's all we saw on Saturdays and Sundays.
That's right.
Those images, and we never brought that back. And the other thing was the economy. This man brought the economy back from what a polarization from the pandemic, and that was never really put out there enough. She talked about what she was going to do. Get first-time home buyers, first-time business people, but never talking about what in 4 years, how he turned the economy, the job situation and everything. That was not put out there enough. And I think those are some faults. I think overall, it was a slam dunk. She was the wrong color and the wrong gender to get elected, but those things were in the way, and we don't fight that back. Let me ask you, we're about to head out of here. What names are you hearing for 28 from the Democratic side?
Well, well, first of all, you can imagine that it's going to be a long list. I think Buttigieg is going to definitely run. Pete's going to definitely run. And I'm going to say this. Pete Buttigieg, pound for pound, may be one of the smartest.
He's sharp.
One of the most, just one of the brightest stars in the Democratic Party.
He's sharp.
He's brilliant.
He's sharp.
And he don't mind going on Fox and handling his business.
Right.
He'll go anywhere. Right. I think Buttigieg is going to be in there. I absolutely think, and I called this a couple of years ago, Wes Moore is going to definitely, I think, is going to run. The governor of Maryland. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You don't think that's premature for him?
Was it premature for Barack?
Yeah, well, who would have ever thought that? Yeah.
All right. I mean, he was in his first term as senator. And it'll be the end of his first term, I believe, in terms of the timing of it.
Yeah.
Or the end of his first term may be at the midterm point, maybe the end of his first. He may be running for re-election at the midterm. I'm not sure in terms of how that works out in terms of timing, but I believe that Wes Moore's name is. In fact, I've heard his name mentioned in terms of running for president. And man, he is central casting. 82nd Airborne, combat veteran. Wall Street guy as well.
How about Akeem?
Nah, I don't see it.
I
mean, he might, but
if he wins the House back, do you think as Speaker of the House he would have? And then you got Gavin Newsom, who
Gavin's going to run.
Had Kamala won, Gavin Newsom would have been a casualty because he'd had to sit, maybe 2 terms waiting for that. So
he's going to run, and so is Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro's going to run.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So those are the names. In fact, it's a pretty strong bench, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree.
To choose from. And each one of those folks who I mentioned about running, and no shade on the New York leader of the House, no shade at all.
Right.
But I really do think that the ones that I mentioned are going to be the ones to really look out for. There's always going to be somebody that comes in who you never thought about, and they show up and show out. But those are the names that I'm hearing and kind of feeling they're going to be in that race, and others as well. But I think the particular Buttigieg is going to be a strong candidate. He really is. He really is.
How much would his orientation hurt him in America today? When you got somebody like Vance that'll be on the other side, keeping that in America's, it'll bring out every redneck and every homophobe out. We just saw that happen this last election. How much of a deficit would that cause in his proposition?
Well, I think it comes down to, once again, out of 340 million people, we talked from kind of coming full circle. The very beginning of this, we talked about that the turnout was low.
Right.
Our voters, in terms of the opposition, did not show up in the numbers that did. The second thing is, given those numbers that did not show up to vote, had they voted in the right percentages, she'd have won, right?
Right.
So that begs the question, is the outcome of the election the real America? Or is it just a reflection on the America that showed up?
Okay,
That's the question. So Buttigieg, I'm not so sure it'll be they're going to try to make it an issue, of course. Mm-hmm. But, as Martin Luther King said, the wheels of justice, the arc of the universe, it bends towards justice.
Yes.
It bends that way, but it doesn't bend that way on its own. It bends that way because we choose to bend it. Right. We engage and it moves. And then, of course, God comes alongside of us because he's always on the side of justice to help us get there. But I think that Buttigieg's campaign would probably bring out, and I'm not talking about the LGBTQIA community by itself, I think it might bring out those folk who sat home and then have now had 4 years of Trump.
Yeah.
And have said, look at the price we paid.
Yeah, for
sitting out.
Yes.
And I think that he'll get an awful lot of I think whoever is the Democratic nominee is going to get an awful lot of influence and strengthening and participation from those who sat out and will be regretting that they did. because I can only imagine some of the stuff that's going to happen during this next 4 years. It's going to be crazy, man. But God brought us, and He'll continue to bring us.
Yeah. So my sermons were well, like no other time. Contemporary music. That's why we have to embrace it. Ty Tribbett just ministered to me. We're gonna be all right. Got me out of bed the other morning, and then it followed up with him saying if he's done it before, he'll do it again. And so that's where we are. Listen, my guest tonight, I only call on him a couple times a year. He's in high demand, and he's great to come and share his multifaceted orientation of facts, intellect, perspective with us. So glad my brother, Pastor John Allen Newman, with us. Anything you want to push before we get out of here, Doc?
No, I not so much push, but let me just say this in conclusion. That, when you said Ty's song, I'm going to be all right, I absolutely believe that is true. Yes. And I saw a lot of posts, after, the turnout or the election results where people were saying, God is in control. And I'm going to harken it back to what we just talked about the arc of the universe bending towards justice. It doesn't bend by itself. Mm-hmm. We got the Voting Rights Act, we got the Civil Rights Act, we got other protections in terms of making sure that we can participate fully in this enterprise called America. But it's because we got engaged.
Right.
And I think sometimes when people use these phrases and they fall back into them for some emotional safety and comfort, God's in control. But God is not controlling. Right. He's in control, but He's not controlling. We have to engage.
Yes.
To change things. Yes. And we just saw what the lack of engagement did. It changed things.
Yes.
But not in the way we believe bends towards justice. And God's not going to change it for us, but God will change it with us. So we've got to engage, and we've got to do that and take that seriously if we want to see the kingdom actually operate as it should on earth as it is in heaven.
Got to leave it right there. A lot of things I want to ask, and we'll be revisiting over in 2025. My dear brother, Pastor Newman, thank you so very, very kindly. God bless your family, your congregation, everything God has put your hands on. We thank you so much.
Thank you. And same to you. Same to you.
Bless you, sir. Listen, we're going to get off of politics next week. We're going to take a look back at one of our old shows. We're going to look at the brilliance of Keenan Ivory Williams, and we're going to take a look back at In Living Color. Next Monday night, right here on Dialogue with Dozie, we're going to do a Thanksgiving show. We're going to highlight high school football, those who poured into the minds of these young kids. And we're going to do some Christmas stuff. We're going to look back at the movie This Christmas. We're going to count down the top 10 Christmas songs of all time and the top 5 Christmas music. That's what's coming up on the next 5 weeks of Dialogue with Dozie. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next Monday night. God bless.